The 12 Dancing Princesses, a modern retelling. King Nelson was livid, his fury severe. His concerned inquiry was horrendous to hear. The gray London sky mirrored his dark mood as he paced through the palace, quite grumpy and rude. "Lack-a-day," he shouted, "the state of these shoes! This abysmal demise is appalling news." Young Laurie, though daring, looked crestfallen and shy, as the yelling exacerbated and made the girl sigh. "I reprimand you," he said, "for this vandalized mess. Under no circumstances is this the standard of dress." He looked at their slippers, which were outdated and torn, and felt quite distraught to see them so worn. "This wreck is an eyesore. An earful you'll get. My tolerance is waning. I'm willing to bet." He insisted on answers. His ire was bright, as the calm before the storm turned to fury and fright. The monotony of ruin was more than he bargained for, as he paced on the carpet and stared at the door. Who has sabotaged these? Who is the thief? This persistent destruction is beyond all belief. Amy and Chloe, in dresses of blue, looked lackluster and dismal as the mystery grew. To maintain their secret was a tedious chore, as their substandard slippers lay marred on the floor. "Stuff and nonsense!" Amy did protest, while Chloe was reticent, failing the king's test. Their juvenile bickering was relentless and sour, as they quarreled and disputed with excessive power. "I object to these questions," Amy cried with a glare, while Chloe just adjusted the clip in her hair. Bella and Millie, in gowns of bright pink, were far from the antithesis of what you might think. They were girly and energetic, enthusiastic and sweet, despite the atrocious sabotage of their feet. "It's inconsistent," Nelson cried with a roar. "How can 12 girls deteriorate shoes on the floor?" The circumstance was dire. His patience was thin, as he wondered what peril his daughters were in. "We lack any knowledge," Bella said with a grin, though Millie was struggling to keep it all in. The king's patience was on the brink of a U-turn. He incensed the suitors who had much to learn. One hostile suitor, petulant and vain, saw his inconsistent efforts go pear-shaped in vain. "The last straw," cried Nelson. "You're incompetent, man. Things have gone down south with your ridiculous plan." He expelled the egotistical lad from the hall. "Are you for real?" the suitor did bawl. He was barred from the palace and disqualified. Hated, his chances of marriage had just evaporated. "The prize is exclusive," the king did propose, "to the man who can eliminate my daughter's woes. But if he is unsuccessful, his demise will be swift. He'll forfeit his life. An irrevocable rift. The stakes were superior, the jeopardy real. A dilemma for any who sought a new deal." Yet another man failed, thwarted and dismayed, as the omen of failure cast a horrendous shade. He slunk from the gates of the Chingford estate, accepting his lonely and lackluster fate. Then came Felix, competent, shrewd, and bold. He didn't hesitate for a story to be told. He would assess the itinerary and review every clue, to right or wrong, and find out what the girls do. Nelson was reluctant, to say the least, but the jeopardy grew like a horrendous beast. Felix's enthusiastic spirit was exemplary and high, as he vowed to the king, "I'll demonstrate why. I won't be intimidated by mysteries or gloom. I'll find why these shoes meet a nightly doom." He was the antithesis of the suitors before, ready to open the mystery's door. He reconsidered the errors and reassessed the path, avoiding the king's petulant and livid wrath. "I won't be deterred," Felix vocalized with pride. "I'll intervene and retain what they're trying to hide." He sat in the hallway, engaged in his task, with sufficient intelligence behind his calm mask. He knew that to fail would be a big error indeed, so he planned out his strategy with excessive speed. Felix met an old woman, a distinguished sight, who offered him help for the coming night. "Don this magic cloak," she said, "an indispensable tool to conceal your intentions and not look a fool." It was his last resort, his light at the end of the tunnel, to evade their detection through a metaphorical funnel. "Abstain from the wine," she warned with a wink, "lest your competence fade and you inadvertently blink. If you drink what they offer, you'll fall into sleep, and the secret they're guarding is yours not to keep." "I must abstain from noise, lest I'm caught red-handed," Felix said as he vacated his room, feeling quite stranded. He was anything but redundant in his stealthy avoidance, ignoring the monotony of the girl's nightly annoyance. He stood in the shadows, waiting for the clock to chime, starting from scratch in the nick of time. The scent of adventure was akin to a dream as he prepared to sabotage their outrageous scheme. He draped the cloak over his shoulders with care, becoming as invisible as the Chingford air. Katie and Millie, the first to proceed, checked the door for a guard with excessive speed. "The coast is vacant," Katie whispered with glee as she donned her blue trainers, as energetic as can be. They didn't hesitate to instigate the flight as they opened a trapdoor in the dead of the night. "It's automatic," Millie vocalized in a hush, her pink skirt swishing in a juvenile rush. They avoided the corner where Felix was stood, behaving exactly as princesses should not. Emily and Georgia, energetic and ecstatic, crept out sans permission, their itinerary automatic. They didn't hesitate to set foot in the woods, though Epping Forest was notorious for out-of-bounds goods. They eluded the guards, who were prone to slack duty, while the scent of the forest hid each precious beauty. "Don't falter," cried Emily. "The peril is far from here." Their juvenile ecstasy was irresistible to hear. The sibilance of the leaves whispered secrets so deep as the princesses woke while the world was asleep. Felix followed them gradually, cloaked and unseen, as they walked through the trees of a spacious dark green. He inadvertently stepped on a princess's gown, making Georgia reconsider and look with a frown. "Something is pulling," she cried in dismay, her infantile fears starting to escalate and play. Albeit quite nervous, she didn't turn back, following the sisters along the dark track. "Don't be petulant, dear," Emily scolded her sister. "It's just a branch catching." But she'd almost missed her. They reached a grand forest where the leaves were of silver, making Felix shiver and his confidence quiver. He intentionally snapped off a precious small twig, which sounded cacophonous, sharp, loud, and big. Crack went the wood like a horrendous omen, making the sisters feel anything but golden. "Did you hear that?" cried Georgia, her voice irate. "Is someone intervening to mar our great state?" She looked all around at the shimmering trees, but saw nothing at all in the cool night breeze. Freya and Harper, adorned in pink lace, led them to gold trees with a relentless pace. The leaves were superior, superstandard and bright, a distinguished demonstration of magical light. Felix retrieved a gold leaf as a sufficient deduction to prove right his theory and thwart their seduction. The sisters relented, thinking the noise was the wind, as towards the dark lake they gradually spinned. "We're almost there," Freya shouted with joy, far from the reach of any prying boy. Beside the dark water, 12 boats were existent, with 12 handsome princes, loquacious and insistent. Felix hopped into a boat with the penultimate pair, making the prince sigh at the weight in the air. "The boat is substandard." "It's heavy and slow," the prince protested. His rowing was low. "To top matters off, the water is dire." But they reached the far shore with energetic fire. The prince felt inadequate, struggling to row, unaware of the passengers sitting below. Jess and Laurie reached a vacant old tree, which was superior to any existent thing Felix might see. They entered a palace, spacious and grand, reminiscent of a dream in a superior land. The cacophony of music began to escalate, and the girls were elated, in a jubilant state. "No wonder our shoes wreck," Laurie vocalized with glee, as Felix concealed himself akin to a bee. They hurried inside to the glittering hall, ready to dance at the magical ball. The underground ballroom was a sight to behold, with pillars of silver and ceilings of gold. The dancing was incessant, excessive, and wild, unlike the infantile games of a juvenile child. Felix watched as the slippers diminished and frayed, a horrendous sabotage of the leather displayed. To prolong this monotony would be a tedious error, he thought, watching relentless with unconcerned terror. Harper and Freya spun round in a blur as the music became a loud, rhythmic purr. Felix snatched up a goblet, a precious gold cup, to complement his twigs as the sun started up. "I've sufficient evidence," he whispered with ire, "to confront their outrage and add fuel to the fire." The girls were exhausted. Their ecstasy waned as the light at the end of the tunnel was gained. They vacated the palace as the music did cease, and returned to the surface in gradual peace. Felix ran on ahead, with a skip and a hop, to reach the king's room before the sisters could stop. Back in Chingford, Felix chose to confront the king. "I've recapitulated the facts and found the missing thing." He demonstrated the twigs and the cup made of gold, as the sisters' regret was a sight to behold. Nelson was tolerant, ending their fears, though the girls were crestfallen and reduced to tears. No more sabotage. The king did insist, and the secret of dancing was finally dismissed. The girls gave in and stayed home from that night, and Felix was rewarded for proving he was right.